thank you so much for the introduction. So I'm happy to be sharing a pipeline that we've built out to enable us to now get a low-cost and high-throughput complete Mycobacterium tuberculosis genome. And for that, we're using, obviously, Nanopore technology. So just some quick background of tuberculosis. It's one of the most enduring and deadly human pathogens. It's been evolving with and infecting humans and our ancestors for millions of years, and it still infects 10 million new people every year and sadly kills 1 million people. So this is still super relevant, although not in all settings. So it's very common to do targeted sequencing for detection of drug resistance. And that's great, but we could be getting so much more by doing whole genome sequencing. So that's the approach that we've tried to build out. With whole genome sequencing, we can also look better at transmission patterns, because the TB genome mutates so slowly, you really need to look at a lot of it to be able to distinguish any differences between similarly related strains. And there are also regions of the genome that have just always been blanket discarded using short-read technologies. That's because these short reads can't align to long repetitive regions of the genome, as you can see in the top of the second figure. So we need long nanopore reads to bridge these regions and be able to make complete and accurate alignments. So far, the DNA extraction pipelines have been optimized and work okay if you are doing PCR or short-read sequencing. You have to be quite harsh when you extract DNA from tuberculosis cells because they have such a thick cell wall. So those harsh techniques often end up fragmenting all of your DNA inside, which is fine for PCR and short-read sequencing. But with the long reads that we're trying to obtain, we clearly need a long input of our fragments of DNA. Another barrier is the cost, and there's a wide range of costs reported. Even for targeted sequencing, this cost is really high. So our aim is to get cheap whole genome sequencing, and then we tick all the boxes, and at a high throughput. So what we did is we broke down every step of the extraction and sequencing pipeline and made variations and saw how we could optimize every step. I'll just talk about some of the key optimizations that we did. So a normal first step in any MTB pipeline is to inactivate it using a high temperature. It's not uncommon, it's not surprising that a high temperature will also end up fragmenting your DNA extensively. The reason for doing that is so that you could then do the rest of the workflow out of the category 3 laboratory. But when we saw how degraded our DNA was doing that heating, and in our case, it didn't even inactivate all of our bacteria, we just did the whole pipeline until we had our extracted DNA in the category 3 laboratory, and then verified that we had nothing viable left, and that way we could maintain really long strands. We tested different methods of lysis, enzymatic, bead beating, different bead beaters and vortexes and speeds, because overbeating fragmented our samples too. We compared an extraction kit using columns from Zymo with a very well-known phenol-chloroform separation method that lots of labs use. And we also experimented using this Covaris G tube, which is a really expensive tiny tube, which is good for bringing down the longest fragments. Now, while I said we don't want too fragmented DNA, you also don't want it to be too long, because it can form secondary structures and these can block the pores. So you're looking for a kind of Goldilocks balance. But that's really expensive, so we'll come back to that. Then in the library preparation pipeline, we compared, starting out with the native barcoding kit, then the rapid kit, and we barcoded between 21 all the way up to 96 samples. And we were starting out with the MinION, moved to the PromethION Flow Cells, and we really pushed the flow cell loading amount from the recommended 18 femtomoles at the time up to 80 femtomoles. So the results of some of those optimizations here, you can see we did 4 different sequencing runs, where each run contained a set of samples that had been extracted in a different way. And here really we're comparing the phenol-chloroform with the method of extraction with the commercial kit. And we're comparing whether we did the controlled fragmentation, bringing the longest fragments smaller, with no fragmentation, so having really long fragments here. And this is a nice way to compare different sequencing runs, which may have started with a different number of flow cells. You can't just compare output from one flow cell to another if one started with far more pores than the other. So by looking at the rate of decline of our occupied pores across time, we can compare the slopes and see which run was running the most efficiently. So from this, we can clearly see that the purple line at the top, which was using our commercial kit and our controlled fragmentation, had the best efficiency, and that's the method that we then used for nearly 400 clinical samples. But it used this expensive G-tube fragmentation. So we thought, well, given that the rapid kit has an enzymatic fragmentation step, maybe that would be okay at getting rid of those really long strands, and we could get rid of this expensive fragmentation tube. So here's a series of 8 runs that we performed using our clinical samples, making further optimizations along the way. We present various run metrics like the run output, sample depth, we've got the cost per sample, and the read length measured by N50. In our first 4 runs, where we were just using the MinION flow cells and the ligation chemistry, those are the orange bars, we were mainly optimizing and pushing the flow cell loading input up to 80 femtomoles, and you can see that we really got a big increase there. Then, as soon as we could get our hands on some PromethION flow cells, we did, and we moved over to those, causing a massive expected increase in sequencing data, which translated to a sequencing sample depth of 400 or 200 when we moved to the rapid, which are the shaded bars. Our cost per sample was massively decreased when we switched to that rapid kit, partly because we didn't need to buy those expensive NEB enzymes that people might be familiar with using ligation, but also because we could get rid of using this expensive $30 fragmentation tube. In terms of read length, this is the key great thing that we've managed to get from our developed pipeline. Because of not heating the samples and doing a gentle bead beating step, we've been able to maintain really long fragment lengths, which have converted to long reads. And even with the rapid kit, surprisingly, the read length didn't really change much. So we've got about 10 to 11,000 base pair average read length, which we're super happy with. And now that can span these long, repetitive, complex regions, and we can get more complete assemblies than ever before. So another analysis that we did, which I would recommend to anybody trying to do high throughput and scale up their sequencing, is downsampling analysis, where you really work out how much sequencing data do you actually need. You saw that we had 200 times depth and 400, but is that enough, too much? What do we actually need? So doing this downsampling, you take samples that already have a high output, or you generate samples with a high sequencing output, and you randomly subset the reads into 5,000, 10,000, etc. And then you treat those as if they were their own samples. We did reference-based assembly back to the reference genome, and then looked at how well key drug resistance loci were covered throughout the genome. And we also generated reference-based assembly metrics to see how well those subsets were being assembled. So this is essential for any cost efficiency optimization, and reduces you generating and analyzing and storing unnecessary extra data. So here are the results of the downsampling that we did for the drug resistance targets. Here in each row, I have a list of 18 key drug resistance loci from the WHO catalog of mutations. And you can see furthest on the left is where our kind of $26 genome lies. We're getting really deep coverage in all of these regions. And then as you go from left to right, you can see how the coverage changes when we use those subsets of fewer numbers of reads. And it's actually only when we get down to less than 10,000 reads that we start falling below the 10 times depth, which the WHO recommends and requests for calling drug resistance. So it looks like 10,000 reads might even be sufficient. In terms of the reference-based assembly metrics, here are just 2 metrics that show we have really great assembly stats for our full assemblies with the $26 genome that I'm presenting, but also all the way down again to 5,000 reads. That's only where the quality really drops off, and it looks like 10,000 reads would have actually been okay. Doing some quick back-of-the-envelope maths, that would equate to only needing a 23 times depth, which is remarkably low. And if you were to optimize multiplexing to only get 23 depth on a MinION or PromethION flow cell, with the PromethION, theoretically here, we could be multiplexing 1,000 samples, which with the dual barcoding kit, with the dual barcoding method, could technically be possible, but this just shows that you could push that figure even further, maybe down to something like $15. So in conclusion, it's clear that MTB DNA extraction pipelines must be adapted for any long-read sequencing approach. Downsampling analysis is key for determining the amount of sequencing data you require. And we've proved that nanopore sequencing can achieve high-quality assemblies and reliable resistance prediction with high multiplexing potential. And we presented a massive cost reduction down to $26 per genome, which makes whole genome sequencing more accessible where TB is most prevalent. These are some future directions with what we're trying to do with that extra clinical data, the extra data that we've got now from the genomes of these clinical samples. We're looking at the regions that weren't ever covered well before with short reads. There are some really important genes in there that interact with the human immune system. We've got extra information to now map better transmission patterns, and we can look at the calculated mutation rate again, now including the whole genome, and see if that's the same or different. Happy to talk more about those in questions. I'll stop there. I just wanted to say thanks, collaborators and funders in Peru and London.